And
Imagine being asked to sign a long-term contract that will reshape your household budget for decades. And the fine print depends on promises made by people you don't control, can't verify easily, and don't trust. That's the tension sitting underneath this exchange. Not a shouting match, not a viral outburst, just a quiet moment where the cost, the risk, and the accountability all collide. This matters because climate policy isn't theoretical anymore. It's invoices, energy bills, taxes, and reliability. And in this hearing, the gap between ambition and enforcement becomes uncomfortably clear. Senator Kennedy asks directly whether the Energy Secretary trusts leaders like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping to honor their carbon commitments. Secretary Granholm replies that she doesn't trust what they say, but instead watches what they do, pointing to China's investment in clean energy as evidence of progress. It's a calm answer.
Secretary Granholm can achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 without nuclear energy playing a substantial role.
I do not.
Okay. I agree with you. I want to go back to my thesis that I hope I articulated it reasonably well. But we don't have an overarching plan or analysis for achieving CO2. In my opinion, we're just throwing money at it. Let's suppose Professor Lundberg is right, 27 trillion a year. That's worldwide to achieve carbon neutrality and maintain it through 2100. Let's assume America's share, we produce 15% of CO2 emissions. That makes our share about $4 trillion a year. That's, I don't know, 8 to 10% of our GDP. Doesn't sound like much when you talk about it that way, but it's still $4 trillion a year, every year. That's money we can't spend on health care or feeding people, housing. What happens if we start spending $4 trillion a year, each year, for every year through just 2050? And China doesn't do its part, or Russia doesn't do its part, or India doesn't do its part, or Vietnam or Thailand. How much is our money going to reduce world temperatures, or the increase in world temperatures? The answer is zero, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's zero, but I do know that this is why we have global
But how much
efforts.
is it?
This is why we have all 190 countries signed on to get to net zero by 2050.
I know they've signed on, and excuse me for
and
interrupting.
countries are moving in that direction, sir.
But they're not doing, I'm asking you, and I hope they do it, okay? If it turns out that the scientists are right. I'm not saying they are or they aren't. It's just that the whole topic has become so politicized. But we never talk about what happens if they don't and what is the likelihood that they will. And let me ask you again, if we spend $4 trillion a year, every year, until 2050 to achieve carbon neutrality in the United States, and President Putin and President Xi and Prime Minister Modi say, I don't think so. I think I'm going to spend that on domestic needs in my countries. How much are we going to reduce world temperatures?
With respect, I'm not going to buy into the hypothetical because they have said, I don't know about Putin, but the president of China and Prime Minister Modi have all made commitments to move in this direction and are spending money to move in this direction. But the better question is, or a parallel question would be, what happens if we don't?
Well, I'm interested in my question, though.
Well,
you're good, but I don't want you to change the subject. Have you ever known President Xi to lie?
Well, I am telling you what is
he lies
in
on
the
occasion,
plan
doesn't he?
and what we have seen in terms of their spending. They have spent about $400 billion a year so far. That was, I think, in 2023 on renewable energy. So
what about Russia?
What about Russia? Spending. Russia,
do you
I can't
honestly
speak for.
believe that
I don't have the information on Russia.
President
They're
Putin,
not very transparent. But all of these countries have signed on to the goal. And my point is, if we don't, sir, if we don't, we will be spending globally $38 trillion a year to clean up after the extreme weather events that are happening because of climate change.
But you use that figure, but I've seen no basis for it. Professor
I can send you that.
Professor Lomberg says it's much less than that. But here's my point. Do we just start spending the $4 trillion a year and spend it blindly every year like clockwork? Or at what point, if China's not pulling its load, or Russia, or Vietnam, or Sub-Saharan Africa, at what point do we say, what model do we have in place to say, whoa, wait a minute, we're wasting our money because they're not spending theirs?
I believe that the United States and its leadership in this world, as well as our allies, are not going to throw in the towel. That this is too important in terms of our world, in terms of climate change going into the future and the devastating impact it is having right now, much less in 2050.
I'm out of time, but do you trust
matters because it's not about trust in one official or skepticism of one senator. It's about how large systems make promises without clear backstops. Climate goals may be global, but the costs are local and immediate. When accountability is diffuse, responsibility has a way of landing on the public. That's the part worth paying attention to, long after the hearing room empties.